All right, so next up, we're going to move on to showing value in another way by creating hatching lines. Now you can do this with pencil, but we're going to actually explore another part of your toolkit. We're going to start looking at the permanent markers that were included in your set. On the front, you'll notice that there's a little diagram sort of showing you what's in this set. There's a 0.03 marker, which is a very, very fine line, a 0.1, a 0.3, a 0.8, which is getting a little bit thicker, and a two-point brush, or a two-point pen, which is a nice wide line. I'd recommend starting with the 0.1 or 0.3 line. I'm going to start with the 0.1 line. It's a nice fine line, and it'll give you a lot of sort of room to play. You can always move up to a thicker line too, and in fact I encourage you to play around with it, but I'm going to start with the 0.1 edge. You'll know which number pen you're working with because they're written on the top, on the caps. I don't know if you can see that if it's zooming in, but here's the 0.1 pen. So hatching means is a way of shading where you're shading an object using parallel lines. So if we imagine our light source hitting our object from the top left corner, to show shading with hatching lines, what I'm going to do is, let me grab my pencil real quick. What I'm going to do is first I'm going to imagine that that core shadow where that is. I'm going to sketch that in with pencil. So here's the pole, here's the curve, and here's the other pole. Okay. So to show shading with a hatching line, I'm going to fill in this medium tone. Remember, with the rendering, we'd used graphite to make a medium tone. But here with pen, I'm going to use parallel lines to go from this core where I defined the core shadow all the way to the edge of my sphere. Okay. Now to show tone, to show that this area is darker and this area is lighter, the way you do it with hatching is you simply add more of those parallel lines. So I'm going to work a little bit more quickly. Now my lines are closer together. I want some of them up here as well. And you simply go over the areas you want darker with more lines that are closer together, and you leave the areas that you want lighter alone. And that's how you show shading with hatching lines. To finish off this hatched circle, or sphere I should say, I am also going to use pencil to sort of lightly draw that ellipse of the cast shadow on the ground. And then using my pen, I'm just going to create those same close together parallel lines as hatching lines, all in the same direction in that area. And as I said before, to make an area darker, you can just go over that same area with lines that are closer together. That's one method. Another method is to switch your pen. So as I said at the beginning of this video, this pen is the 0.1 pen, but you can also switch up to something a little larger. For example, this is the 0.8, and using this pen, you can, in that same area with lines that are close together, it's going to make it look really nice and dark. In fact, I'm liking how that looks so much. I'm going to use this same pen to add more hatching lines in that core shadow of my sphere. All right, cross hatching. I'm going to move over and try out my 0.3. pen. Cross hatching is similar to hatching, but the lines interact with each other in a perpendicular way. So I'll show you what I mean by that in a minute. Again, I'm going to start by imagining my light source from the top left corner. Sketch out those two poles of the light, my core shadow, my cast shadow. We can erase those poles now. Don't need those anymore. So with cross hatching, you start the same way you started with hatching. You can start with parallel lines. And then to add value, to add contrast, you can actually cross over those lines with lines in opposite direction. So for this, oh, you know what? I'm actually going to bring these lines up a little bit more. So in this area here, to make it darker, I can actually wrap the lines in a perpendicular way, crossing over the ones I originally made to make that darker. And so here in the cast shadow, instead of being in this direction, I'm going to cross the direction with hatching lines going the other way. And the same thing goes when you're working here. Feel free to change up your pen. I'm liking how this 0.3 one is working, but you know, try some of the thicker ones, try some of the thinner ones. Just use your sketchbook to really experiment. Have fun. Enjoy. Whoops. Went outside the circle a little bit. Okay, so that's cross hatching. Squiggly. Super fun. Again, I'm going to start the same way I've been starting this whole time, imagining my light source hitting the sphere. One pole, the other pole, and that core shadow wrapping around my sphere. A cast shadow, an ellipse on the ground. So for squiggly lines, this is really fun. I'm going to switch up to my 0.8, I think, my 8 pen. And the idea here is that you're going to use a wandering, squiggling line to just sort of add texture and depth and value. You're doing it all with this fun squiggly line. That's my 8. I'm feeling like it's hard to control the density here, so I'm going to go back down to a 3 and just kind of scribble, squiggle. I'm clustering those squiggles together where I want it to be darker, going over that more. Whee! It's fun. That got pretty dark pretty quickly. It's hard to see where my circle ends and the cast shadow begins. Right, let's come in here. Squiggly. Wish I had left this a little bit lighter. It's hard to see the reflected light, but that's okay. Okay, next up, contour hatching. Contour hatching is where you are using contour lines, so parallel lines, but this time, instead of it being lines in any direction, you're going to try to wrap the lines around the contour of the object. So again, I'm starting my shading the same way I've been in all of the other ones. But you know how we took this line and we wrapped it around the object here? So that's what we're talking about. That's the contour that's showing you the 3D form. So for contour hatching, you're going to be mimicking these lines that wrap around the sphere that tell you it's a three-dimensional shape. So that's what that means. That's what the difference is between contour hatching and just plain old-fashioned hatching. Alright, so I'm going to switch over. I think my favorite pen so far has been the 0.3 pen. I feel like I've got the most control with that one. Okay, so contour hatching, I'm going to start with lines that are grouped together. And again, I'm trying to imagine them wrapping around the sphere. That's where the name comes from. And they get farther apart when you want it to be lighter, and they're closer together where you want it to be darker. And just keep going over the areas you want darker, or switch up to a larger pen. For the ground, okay, the contour lines aren't going to be the same, right? For the ground, the ground isn't three-dimensional like our sphere. You can choose the direction of these hatched lines. You know, some ideas you could go vertical or up and down. You could go side to side or horizontal. You could also go diagonal. I'd recommend choosing a direction that's different from the direction of the contours in your sphere. So I'm going to choose for mine, I'm going to go ahead and do horizontal lines, so that there's a contrast between the lines of the ground and the lines of my sphere. So that way the direction of the line is telling the viewer, okay, this is one surface here, and these lines have changed direction, so that's a second surface. This is feeling a little light. I'm going to switch up to the 0.8 pencil, or 0.8 pen, to get it a little bit darker. In that cast shadow. Again, trying to keep all the lines going in the same direction. Okay, our last technique of adding value using ink is stippling. Another fun technique. Again, I'm starting the same way I've started all these others, imagining my light source, imagining that half of the circle with the two poles, and then where my core shadow begins, and that ellipse cast on the ground, the cast shadow. With stippling, I'm actually going to start with my 0.8, and stippling is dots. So to create a medium tone in the core shadow and cast shadow, I'm just going to start adding dots. I don't want to torture you by making you watch the whole process of this, but the technique is pretty straightforward. You just keep adding dots. In the area, and where it's darker, you make the dots closer together. Takes a little while. And where you want it lighter, the dots are spaced a little farther apart. Now I'm going to keep working on this. Again, it's going to take quite a long time, and I'll show you it. I'll show you what it looks like at the end when I'm all done. But as you can see, I'm spacing them out farther when they're closer to our light source, and putting them really close together in that core shadow. And I started with the 0.8. You also have a larger, where is it? 2. You have a 2 at your disposal. And this might be a good time to break the really thick one out, the really thick marker out, and use that to make those nice dark dots. Okay, I'll check back in with you later and show the finished video. And there you have it. Rendering, hatching, cross hatching, squiggly, contour hatching, and stippling.